Lock and load. Hey, Matthew.
How you doing? It's Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, speaking with
Mark Leon Goldberg of
UN
Matthew Dispatch.
Russell, by the way.
Matthew Russell Lee, that's right.
Okay.
Not to be confused with the Matthew Lee reporter from the Associated Press, who covers a similar beat as you.
I know. It's led to a few misunderstandings. That's the only reason. I guarantee you, I'm not one of these three-name people, but it seems better to keep,
There you go.
Keep things clear.
3 names are better than 2.
Oh.
Was wondering, this is the special Passover edition.
Sure.
And Easter. So Matthew, big goings on at the UN. I was hoping you could catch us up as to what's going on at the Security Council vis-a-vis North Korea.
Yeah, it's been all missile all the time. We're speaking virtually a week after the launch, we'll call it. And a lot of this turns on what names you call the thing. Obviously, it's North Korea's position that this was just a launch of a satellite, which they have every right to do, and so their position is, and actually we've had at the UN the deputy permanent representative of North Korea coming through quite a bit, and laying out that position, saying all countries have a right to develop space and science, and who's the West to tell them that they can't. It seems pretty clear that it was an attempt. I mean, I guess, on the other hand, it seems clear to me, let's put it that way, repertorially, that this was an attempt to both to test and to sort of demonstrate to the world that they have missile technology that could, as CNN puts it with graphics, reach Hawaii, Alaska, and then the West Coast. To be honest, I think when it first, in the run-up to it, Japan is the country that at least verbally, it flew over Japan. So they've been the most aggressive in trying to push to get a resolution condemning the launch. I mean, obviously South Korea is probably even more directly implicated, but they're almost like, I don't want to say that they've been taken hostage. They're not the ones, not only are they not on the council, but usually they're not the ones sort of speaking angrily about North Korea. Maybe because
they're worried that, some sort of collapse of the North Korean state will lead to a refugee crisis in South Korea.
I think they're mostly worried about the launch of
conventional. And also, they're the ones that would the most clear and present danger.
Sure. So the big issue, and I'll try to just do it factually, and then we can kick it around, is in the run-up, the question was whether Japan was going to seek some kind of a preemptive statement by the Council. It seemed pretty clear that wasn't going to fly, particularly because China said, hey, by all accounts, this is just a scientific test. And so so let's wait and see what it is. The one thing that I've come to understand, speaking to a lot of the Japanese media that have really descended like locusts, or there's the North Koreans call it, the Japanese press corps, the reptile media. So they really do chase the guy around. There's probably 60 Japanese media reporters have been at the UN camped out for the last week in front of the Security Council, even when it's not meeting, because it's such a big issue at home. And one of them explained to me quite clearly, he was saying Japan needs a resolution as opposed to a presidential statement, right? So the distinction is, as it's usually described, is between a binding resolution and a non-binding presidential statement. The only caveat to that is that there are resolutions that are not really that binding or that important, but that is the sort of so I asked the guy, I was like, do people in Japan, really not understand, I'm not trying to be paternalistic, but is the difference between the two that clear? And he was like, absolutely. Sort of the media has really zeroed in on Japan must get a resolution.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
both it should be said, or a presidential statement, it should be said requires unanimity of the council, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas a resolution, it could be vetoed, but if countries, and it may play out that way, actually. I mean, there's people, arbitraging and sort of predicting. It's possible that China and Russia would abstain on I'm sort of jumping ahead, but on a resolution that really did nothing new, but was called a resolution so Japan could save face. The thing is that, in a way, Japan has sort of painted itself into a corner, because they've taken Thursday afternoon, in front of the Security Council, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Japan, Mr. Ito. He was there, and he just kept repeating, we're standing by our position that we need a resolution. And China has said, in fact, China has gone even lower than presidential statement. There's such a thing called a press statement, which is essentially just something where the president of the council comes out to the stakeout and reads it out. That's really, and that's all. The day after the launch, there was an emergency council meeting on this Sunday, and at the end of which, after about 5 hours, all they did is come out and say council members have agreed to continue discussing the matter, and some council members are concerned. So it's been, the whole week has been sort of like a Stations of the Cross for Japan, I would say, in the sense of like every day it became more and more clear that China's not budging, and ultimately they might budge, but they've sort of, I don't know if
they're not going to budge, for example, on like a Chapter 7,
correct, exactly.
That's pretty much
exactly. They could actually do a resolution under Chapter 6. Would be, I mean, maybe I've jumped too much. In 2006, when North Korea fired a number of missiles, and there was no kind of fig leaf that the firing had been a satellite launch.
Right.
The council met, and after about 10 days of back and forth, passed a resolution, number 1718, which imposed some sanctions and also said that it was illegal for, that it would violate the resolution for North Korea to continue to develop ballistic missile technology, anything related to ballistic missile technology. So that's the one legal argument, to the degree that you can say that these arguments are legal in the sense. I mean, there are arguments about how an act relates to a text that was passed, but the reality is there's no judge. It's all politics, right?
So here's the question: Is China are they stating that this was not a sort of a nuclear test, or is China?
Right. Well, absolutely. They're saying this was a satellite launch.
So they're okay.
And the way I mean, here's what a lot of it turns on this is that, and actually this was sort of I don't mean to. I stumbled on this one kind of interesting footnote, which is usually the way I try to do journalism, Mark.
Journalism by footnote.
Everyone in the run-up, one of the reasons that people knew the date on which the launch would take place was because the North Korea had informed, the International Maritime Organization, for example, that it was going to launch between April 4th and 8th. And the idea is that under International Maritime Organization rules, ships are supposed to know to stay out of the way, right?
Right.
But as it turns out, only on March 10th, so less than a month before they fired, North Korea joined something called the Convention on the Registration of Objects Launched into Outer Space. It's a pretty obscure little convention, and it was enacted in 1974 in the General Assembly, and countries have joined it. But North Korea joined March 10th, and there's even a photo of the number 2 ambassador of North Korea, signing the treaty. And that was it. So the interesting thing about that, and this is the reason that it's a little bit maybe more than a footnote, is that under that convention, if this in fact was a satellite, and if, as North Korea claims, it went into orbit, most people say it fell to the sea, but their claim is that it's in orbit broadcasting, military songs praising Kim Jong-il. If it's up there, they have to register under the Convention on the Registration of Objects Launched into Outer Space.
But have they?
They have not.
Uh-huh.
So the question is, the thing is that again, this is why it again goes back to being a footnote. Even if they violated the convention, there's no clear-cut sanctions. It's not
Yeah.
But it becomes this weird factual issue. If they're serious about it being a satellite, and if they maintain against all factual accounts to the contrary that the satellite actually reached orbit, then they should register. So this has become a little and Japan is sort of. I think what's weird about it is that Japan, there was a story in Yomiuri that said that they'd also violated the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union's radio rules by not registering the satellite. And then yesterday I asked Ito, are you making that claim? And all he would talk about is 1718. Because I think they realized they don't want to get, that's again why it's a footnote. They don't want to get lost in saying North Korea violated some arcane rules of an obscure convention. To bring it all full circle, their contention, and this is I think the crux of the matter, to the degree that there's any dispute about the legality, is Japan and to some degree the U.S. claims that
Excuse me. Sorry.
Gesundheit.
Thank you.
Continue. That the rocket or missile, whichever you call it, that went up, clearly is related to ballistic missile technology and therefore prohibited by the resolution.
Okay.
And North Korea and China would argue, since North Korea has and retained after 1718 the right to launch a satellite, how else were they supposed to launch it?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the argument would be if the international community meant to prohibit them from developing space, it should have been right in 1718. If you don't take that right away, then of course they have to have a way to try to pursue their rights in space. So anyway.
So we're recording this on Good Friday.
Yep.
And I'm wondering where do we stand as of today?
Where we stand is, and it looks like it's going to be a 3-day lull. The reporters were very concerned. Were very interested in knowing that they'd have all the 3 days off. There was all week. It was there was the emergency meeting. Nothing came out of it. Mostly, it's been meetings of the permanent 5 members and Japan, and really, it's really kind of a face-off between Japan and China. I think Russia will take China's side, but China's been the most sort of verbal in saying. Here's the key phrases. China has said, the response has to be cautious and proportionate. And Russian Ambassador Vitaly Churkin stopped by the stakeout and said, we shouldn't just have a knee-jerk reaction. They don't want to, quote, their view, and again, it's actually weird. I always am thinking, like, maybe I've gone native on this, but China and Russia say that passing a strong resolution would just inflame the situation. And actually, not to be, that's probably true, At least it would move North Korea to say, we're going to go back to, enriching plutonium and we're going to blow you up, Uncle Sam. They probably would say that.
What's interesting, you look back at how the Council reacted in 2006 when North Korea detonated a plutonium device, presumably, right? And actually launched missiles. And it seems at the time, perhaps, that that DPRK overstepped because the council response, as you said before, was pretty swift and fairly definitive. There was a security, there were Chapter 7 Security Council sanctions passed in, I believe, October of 2006.
It happened July 4th. I think I don't know. It was passed.
Well, the detonation. I might be getting my dates wrong, but I believe the resolution happened sometime in the fall. I think it was October, and then something like 6 weeks later, North Korea sort of agreed to rejoin the 6-party talks, and then a few weeks after that. There was the great, Bush administration breakthrough, where after 6 years of obstinance, the administration, in the form of Christopher Hill, decided to engage directly with North Korea to see if they could make progress on that front. And it seems after that, there was progress made. The reactor Yongbyon was dismantled. Their, IAEA was let back in the country. They're 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sort of dynamic, but that it seemed to me at the time that the Chapter 7 Security Council unified action against North Korea back in October 2006 seemed to be the impetus behind what progress the Bush administration did achieve against North Korean proliferation.
Sure. That's what I'm saying. It's arguable whether this idea that it would inflame things. I think the difference of this launch is that they do, and it is kind of like sneaky on their part, right? They have this fig leaf. It's not a blatant I think if you really step back, it is a kind of a screw you Obama message, wouldn't you say? But when you really look at the specifics of it, they have this fig. They've gone out of their way to have a plausible, to some, at least to 2 veto wielding members, plausible argument of why it's not illegal. Clearly it called, I think even China and Russia are not like, let them develop nukes. But their whole thing is, they don't, I guess, like to and I think the U.S. is to some degree shares that position. They really like this to be dealt with outside of the Security Council. They like this to be dealt with under the 6-party talks, And that's why I say, in a way, this whole thing is kind of either driven a wedge or made clear some split between Japan and the U.S. Like really, Japan, for all of the noise that it's making in the Security Council, they don't have a veto. They're feeling, and I think it's one argument that they've made sort of very viscerally is, if China was similarly threatened, China would be demanding a resolution. And it's true. It's kind of, this shows the difference, I think, in political power, certainly at the UN, between China and Japan. Like, Japan feels like existential angst and threat of this action. and yet sadly it's unable to get what it sort of promised its people it would obtain.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad.
Finish your thought. Sorry.
No. So I mean, the last thing I'd say is like even when it launched, my sort of like cynical analysis, and I mean, it's not a question of sticking to it. Ultimately, Japan, for domestic political reasons, needs a resolution on this so much that I can imagine China saying, "What's in it for us?" And I think honestly, more than gets reported, and more than sometimes can be really proved from the outside by documents, everything is everything is horse trading. Every country has its own like key interests, and if one proponent of a resolution needs it so badly, the people that are in the position to block it will say, "What are you going to give me?" And my guess, very cynically, is that it might be something like, no more pressure about Myanmar, or one can imagine any number of issues on which I don't know if they could get Article 16 for Bashir in Sudan. That train seems to have left the station. But seriously, everything is who has leverage and who needs what,
Well, this actually that seems to provide a good transition into another topic I might broach. I wanted to ask you one last question on this topic, though. If you were a betting man, would you place your chits on a resolution, a presidential statement, or a press statement?
I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty. I mean, I think that we laid out what the issues are, how they're going to actually you know what? I'm going to go. I'll be bold here. I'm going to go for and probably in exchange for some trade to China that we'll never know. I'm going to go for a resolution, but a resolution that does absolutely nothing except reaffirm 1718, but which will allow Japan to say now 1718 is really going to be enforced. We're really going to stop ships and search them and stuff like that. And the only sort of hedging I'll do is to say Japan could even make that claim about a presidential statement that said, we're calling 1718. So it'll be one of those two. I'm sorry to hedge it that way, but there certainly will be no new sanctions. That I'll bet you money on, Mark. There'll be not an iota of new, of sort of either like new. What Japan wants is there's 10 companies that they claim are assisting in the development of this ballistic missile technology. They want them named in a new resolution and put under sanctions. And that's, I will tell you now, not going to happen.
Okay.
Not happening.
So fair enough. So back to the transition that you so wonderfully set up for me. So speaking about horse trading and whatnot, so I'm sure I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but in our intermediary weeks where we don't talk to each other, big news: the United States officially decided to run for a seat on the Human Rights Council.
Yep.
Now, the United States is part of what's called the Western European and Other Group. Yep. So the U.S. So countries are voted onto the council by a majority of the General Assembly. So it's something like 97 votes. But in order to get nominated, but countries are nominated by their regions, and there are a certain number of seats allotted for every region. As it happens, there are 3 seats available coming up in May for what's called the Western Europe and Other Group, which is essentially the WEOG group, which is essentially the British Commonwealth, Western Europe, Israel, and the United States, and Europe, of course. And so 3 seats open. The United States decides to run. However, there are 4 countries that want a seat on the council when the United States says it wants to run. Those countries, if I'm remembering correctly, are Norway, Belgium, New Zealand, and the United States. New Zealand drops out. What's that? The Kiwis are standing down, and I'm wondering, Matthew, what significant event involved New Zealand in the UN in recent weeks?
Oh, you're talking about horse trading. Very good. There's probably the allegation would be that in exchange for throwing their support behind Helen Clark to head up the UN Development Program as the new administrator, that the U.S., which did have a candidate for the post, may have decided to withdraw their candidate, support Helen Clark, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, in exchange for New Zealand saying, okay, you can be on the Human Rights Council. And I think New Zealand looks really good doing that too. Sort of, and I will, and I know that you think that many people say that will increase, the U.S. joining the Human Rights Council will sort of make it, a less, by having the largest member sort of boycotting it, made it always a bit questionable. But then being on it, I mean, be aware, one of the things that our listeners have asked for is an update on this, on the defamation of religion situation.
Yeah.
So what we can say is, since they asked for it, this has happened. It has passed. The Human Rights Council has passed a defamation of religion resolution in Geneva. And those things don't have to be unanimous. So I can imagine the U.S. could have, kicked and screamed about it, but it would have passed nonetheless. It has been passed. I've actually asked, like, the sort of New York office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights what they thought of it. And actually, the guy who was released in New York sort of defended it and said, group rights are important, and, think of Rwanda, he said, there's such a thing as hate speech. And then he directed me to something that Navi Pillay has written, which is much more sort of either Western or where she says groups are important, but human rights are really about individuals, and free speech should win out, which I think is the position of the U.S. government. I think from what I've read on the Blogging Heads comment page, most of by far the majority of the commenters seem to feel that as well. I probably feel that.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably, you're absolutely, I see the segue. The segue is, there's, horse trading.
I just wanted to, I wanted to make the point. I think I would point readers that are interested to a really great interview with Susan Rice, in the Politico by, I believe, Ben Smith. And in that interview, Rice explains, the American decision to join the council. And I think she frames it really nicely. She says, without with the United States not on the council has largely been a failure. And so we know sort of one thing for certain, and that thing we know for certain that is if the United States is not on the council does not fails. We don't know yet what happens, how it will work if America is on the council. So it's worth a shot, and I think this is part of a larger pragmatism toward international institutions that I think is emblematic so far of the Obama administration, at least in its early stages. And it'll be interesting. And that I think is a nice contrast to sort of previous administrations, what seem to be a more ideological opposition to multilateral forum. But now, I'm curious to see what happens. Frankly, that with the United States on the council, will they do more to ensure outcomes that are favorable to their interests? And one thing, you see a lot of opposition to America joining the council from more conservative American writers, people who I would probably call neoconservatives. Like Jonah Goldberg wrote a op-ed in the LA Times against it. Ann Bayevsky frequently writes against it. And what's curious to me is that these people you largely categorize in the staunch defender of Israel camp. Why would they not want the United States on the council, where it is in a better position to defend Israel from unfair criticism and unfair allegation? What's that?
In their defense, and again, I'm going to actually.
Please, yeah.
I mean, I think that the argument is that from these people's point of view, if the U.S. boycotts the Human Rights Council, it undermines some of the legitimacy or authority of the council. By being on it, you sort of legitimate it, even if you vote against things when things come out. And I've actually thought this week of something it's similar. And I mean, I'm sure there is this UN thing called the Global Compact, right?
Right. Wait. Before we stick on this, I just want to stick on this one point real quick. One of a recent decision by the Human Rights Council was, as I'm sure you know, to appoint Judge Richard Goldstone to investigate alleged Israeli crimes and also Palestinian Hamas crimes stemming from Operation Cast Lead from the Israeli invasion of Gaza in December and January. And Goldstone, for people who don't know, is a real lion of international law. He's a South African. He is a judicial activist against apartheid during the era. He's also Jewish, and he's also has strong ties to Israel. I believe he serves on the board of governors for Hebrew University. He was a former war crimes prosecutor. I think the first head of the Yugoslav and Rwandan war crimes tribunal. So this guy is like a big deal in international law circles, big deal in general. And he's not someone I think people can accuse of having, an anti-Israel bias by any stretch. So, and it's not, someone that people could easily dismiss. So now it seems to me, now that the UN Human Rights Council has taken this decision to, nominate Judge Goldstone to investigate, actions, what happened in Gaza, the Israeli government is suddenly put in a very uncomfortable position of having to decide whether or not they're going to cooperate with this. On the one hand, it's, if they decide to not cooperate, it sort of further isolates them. On the other hand, if they do, if they do accept this investigation, maybe Judge Goldstone will come to conclusions that might make the Israeli government a bit uncomfortable. And I guess the point is, presumably, Israel would prefer not to have to make that decision. And seemingly, with the United States on the council, they could have steered that decision to a more favorable direction. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
No, I definitely see. I mean, that's why I say it cuts both ways. You're going to see it wasn't. My transition wasn't as cheesy as you might think it is, and it goes like this: the UN has this entity called the Global Compact. Right. It's the UN's way of reaching out to and working with corporations, right?
Yes.
Now, various NGOs have criticized it since it began. It began under Kofi Annan about 10 years ago as being kind of blue washing and having no standards. And, companies will join. PetroChina, for example, is a member. It's a Chinese petroleum company, very active in Darfur. But you also have, I looked at, a variety of other companies. Deutsche Bank is a member, and a complaint has been raised against them of doing banking for the dictator of Turkmenistan. And the complaint is Deutsche Bank continues to do it. Okay. But a new law was hit this week, and you're going to see why. I actually was thinking of the Human Rights Council for this reason. Ban Ki-moon, and I say it with there's much can be said about him, but this is a decision that I want to say is 100% wrong. He appointed to the board of directors of the Global Compact on March 11th a South Korean businessman named Che Tae-won, not spelled like Taiwan, and there's a joke based on that, but Che, Taewon. And this is a man that, as head of the SK Group, was convicted of fraud in 2003. The sixth part is that he was sent to jail supposedly for 3 years. Later, because he's a big political muckety-muck, he received a pardon. But that's all fine and good, but why in God's name, for a UN body that's supposed to stand for corporate ethics, would you put on a man convicted of fraud? And I think the point being is and here's was the connector, is it reaches a point where some of even the NGOs that have sort of held their nose and been a part of it because they say, well, it's better to be here inside the tent trying to reform it rather than outside throwing rocks at it. The analogy being to the U.S. and the Human Rights Council. At some point, the balance tips, and by having a corporate fraudster on the board of the Global Compact, it becomes an open question whether and one Global Witness is a very respected NGO that started to say that the Global Compact is effectively useless. But at a certain point, it becomes nothing but a whitewashing measure. And so you'll end up having, I believe, some people that sort of, and the analogy is, in this case, between sort of well-meaning NGOs saying, let's be part of it and try to reform it. But at a certain point, and this is where I think the difference is between some in the U.S. that you're calling the neoconservatives and others, they just say, like, you believe that the Human Rights Council is eminently salvageable, and it's better for the U.S. on the inside trying to reform some of the decisions that I think even you would admit are kind of absurd and outrageous.
Right. Yeah.
And the others would just say it's so far gone, it's better to boycott it. And that is a kind of head in the sand approach. But I think even you would agree, there will come a time where a body is so compromised that to say be in it to reform it is the wrong decision. You just disagree whether that's
right. No. I mean, listen, and maybe the jury is still out on whether the Human Rights Council is salvageable. But one thing we know for sure is that it does not work if the United States is not a part of it. I mean, this we know. What we don't know is whether or not the United States, American engagement in the Council will make it a better institution. I happen to think it probably will. But
Goldstone on it. But if it's a kangaroo court, it's not going to work with him on it either. And maybe it's better. I mean, I'm not saying that that's true of the Human Rights Council. I'm just saying structurally, it doesn't work without somebody on it. doesn't mean that the decision is necessarily join it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm just saying that one outcome we know for sure. That is that without America on it,
right.
it doesn't perform as effectively as it could.
I got you.
With America on it, perhaps it will. I think it's worth giving it a shot.
Right. Well, I actually want, and this, I'm compelled to do it. You can beat me up if you want, but using Susan Rice as the connector. Yesterday, there was in front of the U.S. mission to the UN a protest of Tamils. And this is I'm backing into the more substantive update, but there was actually quite a few of them, and there was two of them. 3 people have been fasting through most of the week, taking only juices. This is like on 45th Street between 3rd and Lex, and they're penned off by the police. And they have signs saying, "Obama, where's the change? Where's the change we can believe in?" And Susan Rice, "Stop genocide in Sri Lanka." These were the signs. I'll have to also admit, and this was, I have some comment on this, but there were some pro-LTTE signs in the crowd as well, which has been something that the government has pointed at. The substantive update is as follows. Even John Holmes, even the UN's humanitarian coordinator who sort of tried to dismiss his own numbers on civilian casualties, etc., has in the last week written an op-ed in The Guardian saying there is soon to come possibly a bloodbath on the beach in Sri Lanka. There's 100,000 people trapped in a very small area. There are, I kid you not, bullhorns set up outside the supposed no-fire zone saying, "This is your last opportunity, Tamil Tigers. Come out." Essentially, we're coming in. They're unverified because there's no journalists. There are reports of the use of chemical weapons. And it all seems to be coming to a brutal head. Now, I don't want to say we're seeing this on a Friday, and I'm certainly not. There are some who say, like, as early as this weekend, the government would just go for the gusto. Like, they have it, everything is so narrowed down to a small area that it's sort of like they could do it, and I doubt very much the Security Council would have any emergency meeting. I mean, there was an emergency meeting on the North Korea missile, which injured no one, although it threatened many. But seriously, the government of Sri Lanka, in this case, could, in making its final offensive, kill 10,000 civilians, and I would bet you money there would be no Security Council meeting. Certainly not an emergency one. And that's kind of an outrage. But Ban Ki-moon, the last thing I guess I want to say on this is, my analysis is that the UN has taken a Janus face, or double-faced on this. I asked Ban Ki-moon before he went on this trip where he is right now to Laos and the ASEAN meeting, "Are you calling for a ceasefire in Sri Lanka?" And he gave a long answer, not using the word ceasefire. He didn't even use the word suspension of hostilities anymore. He said, "We're calling on the government to comply as it does its fight with international humanitarian law," which maybe seems like enough to some. I think it's pretty, given that his own people have said that there is no way to conduct this offensive on the no-fire zone without killing way too many civilians, that the UN wouldn't have it within itself, or the UN's top individual wouldn't have it within himself to say, "I'm calling for a ceasefire," is, to me, unbelievable. Mark?
Listen, it's. I mean, you bring us these updates, every week from Sri Lanka, from the Sri Lankan perspective. I think is really, useful and valuable. I don't know how much I could add to that. I mean, it seems.
No, I'm sorry.
The dire is pretty. It's like a pretty desperate situation. I think, what's key is that key member states like the United States and other members of the Permanent Five, start making this their issue. And like you said, people it seemingly can't really muster the political will to draw attention to the crisis in Sri Lanka, in northern Sri Lanka.
I want to tie it to one of your favorite people, Samantha Power. This is actually something I was thinking of yesterday while standing. Again, I have to say, I mean, in fairness, when I saw these LTTE signs, Tamil Tiger signs, I was a bit, and I even said that some of the organizers were like, "Oh, inner city press, we love your coverage." And I was like, number one, I'm here as a journalist. Number two, like, those signs are not helping you in the least. Because this is exactly why even countries like the UK and the US that say they want to do something, their excuse for doing nothing is like, maybe this is just all a front to support a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
And then one guy said to me, "They're the only defenders of the Tamils." And it's like, even if you believe that, like, keep your sign in your house,
Yeah.
Anyway, and then they said to me, they're going to call you a white tiger. It went around and around. But the reality is I think whatever, I'm going to, I'll say it again. You shouldn't have to say it that many times, but the Tamil Tigers are terrible. They have used human shields. I mean, one understands how a group sort of brings down that road.
Right. They invented suicide bombing.
Yeah, but that said, it's clear. It seems to me like when you look at any, comparing it to whether it's the Balkans or Rwanda or anything else, like this is a situation in which civilians are put way too much at risk, are being killed, and you have a government you could call on to stop it. So my question was, I sort of wonder, like, you have Samantha Power, right? She wrote the book on genocide, A Problem from Hell.
Right.
Again, I don't want to, there's some dispute. You could say, well, this is Sinhalese against Tamils. I mean, it starts looking...
It's massive. Let's not get hung up on the genocide word. It's a massive atrocity.
Whatever you call it, this is a situation of already massive and potentially mass civilian death. Right. And it's taking place on the watch. It all began, in fact, January 20th is when the assault began. So this is I'm not saying it's an Obama problem, but it's a problem from hell for the Obama administration, I believe. Because for all the talk of never again, and this is it. Like, this is the first test. And so, I mean, again, I'm not just trying to, like, say Samantha Power per se. I just sort of...
No, I know, but...
I was there yesterday looking at... One of these protesters had a sign saying, don't let there be another Rwanda, RTP. And behind that was the sign saying, Obama, where's the change we believe in? And it's like, okay, Rwanda sign, Obama poster, where is Samantha Power on this issue? It's not to overly personalize it, but this is for all the talk of sort of other situations going on in the world. Sometimes the test that you face is not the one you would have chosen. It's not a convenient one.
Right.
But this is the test, and I have to say, thus far, it's not none of the grades still out. It's not a very high grade.
Right. Well, it's an interesting point. It's something I thought about when Samantha Power, who you said I've just amazing respect for, was tapped to serve in the National Security Council. You wonder if what's going to happen. I wrote a post at the time, kind of sketching out what seemed to be, hopefully she's there fighting the interagency battle on behalf of the, on behalf of the rights of people around the world. But as she pointed out so beautifully in her book, the U.S. government bureaucracy is not set up in a way to effectively respond to genocide. Now, either she can try to change that bureaucracy from the inside, but it seems, sort of a lesson to draw from her book, though, is that it's a really slow ship to move, and it's will be, like you said, I'm curious to see what happens, and I haven't yet thought of Sri Lanka as the test case, but maybe I should.
Yeah, and I think hopefully the answer to the question is answered before the now predicted bloodbath on the beach.
Yeah.
Like, I guess my thing, it's easy to say it. Obviously, she believes that from that position she can do a lot of good, but this would be the time. Again, I don't mean to. Yeah. I just really struck me yesterday. I don't mean to be overly like, this is your test, but the reality is just do a little Google search, Samantha Power in Sri Lanka, and see what's been said. Because I think without it does, the Obama administration would certainly purport to be one in which, if its high officials who personally know Obama feel that something should be done, that they wouldn't be silenced.
Yeah.
That they would be, particularly if it was a position of principle, they would be free to even disagree with current policy and say, I feel this. So I think, hopefully, Googling against genocide, let's see what is in fact said and done, because the U.S. has a lot of, everything is where you choose to use your political leverage, but they have quite a bit of it.
Yeah.
And in fact, here's a perfect example, and this is not the test, but a pop quiz. Coming up as early as April 25th is a vote at the IMF on giving a $2 billion loan to the government of Sri Lanka, which they've said very openly is to replenish the coffers of the $1.6 billion that have been spent on this military offensive, and to build what many call detention camps in northern Sri Lanka.
Right.
So part of this is a kind of an arcane thing. I can't say that the fasters were saying, were directed at the IMF loan, but I do know that some of the analysis has been, this is something where it's not even a matter, because the U.S. could say, hey, we said what we did in the council. We can't make them meet if China says no. But the U.S. has essentially a veto on IMF, right?
Yes.
And
interesting. And if you recall, if you remember your history, the one of the key sort of reasons that B.J. Habibie of Indonesia back in 2002 1992. No, probably 2000. Let the East Timorese vote for independence is because President Clinton threatened to withhold a either World Bank or an IMF loan against Indonesia. So these are potential policy options to apply political pressure and affect change
the test has
in
arrived.
governments. So there you go. Excellent. Well, I think we have to wrap it up there, if that's okay, Matthew.
No, definitely. We can get back. There's been Congo, Madagascar.
Yeah,
I'm sure we can pick it up.
We'll pick it up next time. But thank you, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Sure, definitely. You too.